Okay, welcome everyone to Module 4. This is part 2 of how to set a renewable energy goal. To review the overall series, again, this is to arm you all with what you need to evaluate, set, and execute on a renewable energy procurement strategy. We're kind of in phase 2 of the overall journey at the moment, which is setting the goal itself, having those internal and external conversations required to set a goal that you're confident in. In this module specifically, we're going to be talking about how the goal fits in with your broader sustainability strategy, and what are some of the initial steps you have to take to get internal stakeholders aligned and to engage on external partners, NGOs, and such. So here we are in the overall cadence. This is Module 4, Part 2 of how to set a renewable energy goal. Once we wrap up this module, then we're going to start to get into the meat and bones, or meat and potatoes, I think is the is the correct term, of how to do renewable energy procurement and what the specific options are available. So we're talking about a renewable energy goal specifically, which is, for many of us, only one key part of a overall sustainability strategy. So, this is we're talking from VMware's perspective. So over here, I've pulled out, some copy from VMware's website about their journey to net zero, and you can see that VMware has a broad strategy about how to get to net zero that incorporates a lot of different aspects. And then one key piece of that is renewable energy. So this is how you should also be thinking about your renewable energy goal, is in the context of a larger emission reduction strategy. Maybe you are thinking about a science-based target, which we'll get into a bit later. Or maybe renewable energy is kind of the first step in that journey. But the first step in what will become a broader sustainability strategy. So it's important to think about it in this context and to not make decisions in a silo about specifically the renewable energy piece of it, but to think in a broader context. Speaking of the broader context, I wanted to prime you all with some external groups and frameworks that you're probably going to come across in this journey, and that can help you either set a target, set a goal, make a commitment, or report on those annually. So the first one you might come across is RE100. This RE100 is Renewable Energy 100, which helps corporates to set, commit to, and report on their journeys to achieving 100% renewable energy across their operations. RE100 has been around for a few years now. I believe there are over 400 companies that have set goals through RE100, one of them being VMware. There are a lot of tech companies, a lot of data center providers that have set renewable energy goals through RE100. RE100 has a lot of resources on what constitutes renewable energy, what types of procurement options are preferred, and what are some considerations for you when you're thinking about geography. So they are a super great resource. They're also doing a ton of research on developing markets as they develop. So if you're thinking, if you have a load in a region where there aren't currently a lot of renewable energy procurement options, you can keep tabs on RE100. I'm sure they're looking at it. They'll issue a white paper about some region, and you can leverage that in your planning and in your goal setting. CDP stands for Carbon Disclosure Project. This organization has also been around for quite some time, and it's a formal reporting framework for company emissions. So a lot of companies on this webinar right now will probably already be reporting to CDP, and it is kind of the leading organization for reporting on your annual progress A lot of investor questions will come through CDP. A lot of companies will try to get their suppliers to report emissions through CDP, a project called the CDP Supply Chain Program. And it's monitored by government entities too, to understand who's reporting what their emissions are and to monitor overall progress. Science-Based Targets Initiative. This is a bit of a younger group than the other two, but has still been established for about 5 years now. The Science-Based Targets Initiative focuses more on emissions reductions and setting emission reduction goals that are actually aligned with the science of climate change broadly. So thinking about what are the levels of decarbonization that need to happen for each company and each industry if we're going to limit global warming to an acceptable level. So the Science-Based Targets Initiative has different levels. There's 1.5 degrees of warming, there's well below 2 degrees of warming. And depending on the type of goal that you set, you have to align with those. So, the theory behind the Science-Based Targets Initiative is that if all companies and all sectors set science-based targets and actually meet those targets, then as a collective group, as a planet, we will actually be able to meet or keep warming below those levels.
And Elliot, one thing to add about Science-Based Target Initiative is that the goals that companies are setting are not only for their own operations, but also that of their supply chain. So reducing carbon emissions in their supply chain. So the renewable energy procurement that our companies would be doing is mostly targeted at your scope 2 or your electricity consumption of your own operations. Yeah.
Yeah, so in prior modules, we talked about scopes 1, 2, and 3. We talked about how everyone's scope 3 is someone else's scope 1 and 2. And that's a key point for within the Science-Based Targets Initiative is, you're going to have to, if you set a goal through them, you're going to have to look at your scope 3, which will be looking at the scope 2 and electricity consumption of many of your suppliers. GRI is another one. They're similar to CDP. It's a framework that allows you to report on certain sustainability metrics annually. And then a couple more. I know there's a lot of acronyms in this space, so bear with us. These three are all additional types of frameworks for reporting annually. The TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, focuses on financial reporting. What are the impacts of your business? Like, what are the climate risks impacts of your business? And SASB and the Dow Jones Sustainability Indexes are similar. I'm not going to get into the nuances necessarily because it's not super important to know distinctions between each, but I just wanted to show you each of these frameworks and to prime that whatever renewable energy target you set, whatever emissions reduction strategy you set, you should be looking at these frameworks to help you report. And a lot of the times you might be, it might become a requirement to report through these frameworks. I saw Nicola, maybe you had a point to add there.
Well, just sort of the TCFD, the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, and SASB, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, they are developing reporting metrics and mechanisms to report to investors about how companies are addressing their climate change risks and opportunities. And we're starting to see movement, if people might have heard in the US on the Security Exchange Commission, the SEC, is now starting to work towards mandating these climate disclosures in the financial disclosures. So this is definitely, if it's not on your radar, this is definitely something you want to be paying attention to. And obviously setting renewable energy goals can help with your disclosures.
Yeah, and this is a good one for benchmarking as well, understanding which of your peers, which groups your peers have signed up to, if they have an RE100 commitment, if they're reporting to CDP, if they're reporting to through TCFD. Understanding kind of what they're doing will help you make some decisions about which frameworks you should or want to be reporting to. Also wanted to highlight another organization for you guys called SIBA. So SIBA is the Clean Energy Buyers Association. They're a network of over 300 companies like yourselves that are committed to procuring renewable energy globally. SIBA is a fantastic resource for any company setting out on a renewable energy strategy or executing on a renewable energy strategy in their global operations. There are a ton of resources that you can access through SIBA about, how to set a goal, what procurement options are available in different markets, what are your peers doing, what are some lessons learned. Like there's tons of case studies that they have. There's an annual conference you can go to. There's online webinars at a frequent cadence. And as you can see with the logo map that only goes up to L on this image here, there are a lot of organizations that are SIBA members, it's just a good community for understanding, for sharing ideas about how they're procuring renewable energy. VMware, I believe, is a SIBA member, right, Nicola?
Yes, and I'll just take this opportunity to double plug the Clean Energy Buyers Association. They are a tremendous resource. It is a paid subscription, but they have different levels of membership. They are a wealth of resources. So not only, as Elliot mentioned, the webinars, and they have a boot camp, which if you're at all interested in the material we're covering here, they go into much more depth in about a 2.5-day boot camp for you. And then they have primers on accounting primers and all different kinds of documentation, how to help you navigate your executive organization to convince them that why you should be setting a goal and how to go about doing it. So it's a really good organization if you're ready to move forward. And even if you're not, it's a good organization to learn more about why you should be considering procuring renewable energy and setting goals.
Yeah, and we have a 6-month free offer, right, for partners who kind of register with SIBA and use their domain name and are valid partners on VMware's program. Then you'll get 6 months free access to SIBA resources, which hopefully you find useful, and then you'll sign up afterwards. Yeah,
that's right. Good point, Guy. Yeah, so 6 months free to get you started and see the value of SIBA. Yeah.
Yeah. Can't express enough how valuable of a resource they are. And we are going to be touching on them again in module 9 when we get into the road mapping process, how to actually set a goal, because they'll be super helpful at that stage as well. Once you've set a goal, once you've researched all these reporting frameworks and NGOs and whatnot, the next step is to announce that goal. So this is, this can be a valuable communications moment. So I would recommend engaging with your marketing team, engaging with your comms team, looking at whether you want to issue a press release, do a blog post on your website. You can leverage some of these groups like RE100 and SIBA if you're, to help you amplify the announcement that you're making. Would definitely recommend adding the goal to your sustainability page on your website if you have one, to your sustainability report. To work with, just a plug to work with your marketing team on a kind of an overall strategy. I also just want to touch briefly on making proper renewable energy claims. So this is, we're talking about marketing and communications at the moment, and it's super important to use the right language. So, there's the goal language, which is like kind of very specific about renewable energy and the time frame and whatnot. But when you're talking about a blog post, and we're adding paragraphs and we're starting to get into this stuff more, it's super important to be very specific and to be careful with the language that we're using, so that we're avoiding any claims of greenwashing, and we're avoiding any reputational risk there. Some some key things. We can talk about renewable energy. You could also potentially be more specific and use the term renewable electricity. That's one tip for just kind of making sure everyone reading your content knows exactly what you're talking about, that you're talking about the electricity portion instead of the broader energy context, which could include thermal energy. Again, be very extremely clear about the coverage and the scope. So you don't want to be setting a goal, kind of an amorphous goal, we're going to achieve 100% renewable energy, and actually you're just talking about your data center operations. So just be very specific about that. Consider talking about like the exact types of, like, starting to go into the strategy. So instead of just saying we're going to be procuring renewable electricity, talk about how you're going to be doing that. Talk about focusing on either certain technology types, maybe, which again, we're going to get into that in the road mapping process a bit more. But by the time you announce your goal, you should have, somewhat of an idea of the strategy that you're going to implement, at least initially. So if you're going to focus on on-site solar, you can talk a lot about that in your in the announcement of your goal. And then in addition to the technology types like wind and solar, you can be clear about what procurement methods you're using. So if you're going to use only on-site projects or only utility programs, or you're going to have a mixture of both, or you're going to lean on power purchase agreements for a lot of your load, you can start to talk about that in your goal. And that will ground the announcement in some specifics, and it will avoid some of the claims like, oh, they're just making a claim and they don't know how they're going to do it. You can sort of answer those questions initially by saying, actually, we have a thought through strategy. Here's kind of what we're looking at the moment. Again, this doesn't have to be binding, but it's just helpful to have some of these details when you announce your goal. And then just highlight a couple of examples of how companies will do this. So here we have on the left a tweet from AB InBev, which is always a nice way to communicate. Here in the middle, we have this is a story through an affiliate website. I'm forgetting which one this is, but leveraging third-party groups to leverage that to amplify that content. And then here we just have your standard press release from HP.
And then a lot of times companies will make these announcements, say during Earth Day, Earth Month, Climate Week. Although I would say so many companies do it in those timeframes that sometimes it's better to actually do it at a different time frame so you're not lost in the noise. But if you have a company conference, for example, company customer conference to announce to your customers or investors or whoever your major stakeholders might be.
Yeah, which thanks for bringing that up, Nicola, which goes back to an initial point I made about thinking about the broader context of these things. Don't think about your renewable energy goal in a silo. Think about what other sustainability announcements or commitments or conferences or anything else that's going on, and think about aligning the announcement of your goal to those. And then reporting on progress. So you've set a goal, you've announced a goal. It's super important for transparency's sake, to always be reporting on progress to that goal. So there are some of the frameworks we talked about earlier, RE100, CDP, Science-Based Targets Initiative, are helpful frameworks to report on that goal. You don't have to use them. You can report yourselves. You can report in your annual sustainability report. You can have some other mechanism where you do this. But I do want to stress how important it is to do this, because no one wants to set a goal for 10 years from now and then not think about it for 5. It's important to have these these checkpoints in place, because it's also a valuable time for you to check in with the internal stakeholders and say, hey, we have to report to RE100 this year. What progress are we planning to make by the time we need to report, so we can have something good to say. And here's just an example. This is from Target, from their 2022 ESG report. Here they're showing they're 52% renewable energy. That's and they're showing the breakdown of that: 34% EACs and 18% grid electricity. So just an example of how you can do that in your own sustainability report. So that concludes module 4, which was part 2 of how to set a renewable energy goal. Hoping you all are now comfortable with that process internally for how to set a goal. And at this point, you should be ready to set one and get into the nitty-gritty of how you're going to do that in the next few modules, where we're going to be talking about what is renewable energy, what procurement options are there, and then get into specifics about what those might look like within your strategy.